one question I have is between 2016 and 2020, it was very easy for people to dismiss the problems you're describing by saying, okay, all that sounds annoying and dumb, but we have a literal, white supremacist, fascist, et cetera, or just authoritarian or dangerous lunatic in the White House. Isn't that the much bigger threat? And I think that made it difficult for people who care about this issue of free speech and viewpoint diversity on campus to sort of fight for that issue because there was always this sort of clapback. I'm curious, to what extent do you think Trump exacerbated this problem, or is it totally independent of Trump?
Oh, no. I think there were two accelerants. So one of the things we talk about, we talk about 6 causal threads of why we think the problems we were seeing on campus and with Generation Z happened. And social media, in some ways, it did create new phenomena, but it also accelerated a lot of existing ones. Like polarization went much faster. Like a lot of these existing fissures got a lot worse, a lot quicker. There were 2 accelerants, and the election of Trump, I mean, it sped a lot of that polarization up. A lot of the sort of paranoia got worse. So I do think that the intensity of that administration really made for a much crazier situation.
I would add that the same trends were happening in Canada and the UK. So Trump was not necessary, but Trump did mask a lot of what was going on. Now, he made things a lot worse, but he also masked a lot of what was going on, as did COVID. So, for example, I co-founded Heterodox Academy in 2015. It was just a faculty initiative of social scientists studying what are the effects when we lose diversity and everyone's on the same team. And my job was kind of fun until Trump was elected. And all of a sudden, I was so far out on thin ice because, the goal was to convince, center left or people who are true liberals that, we actually need, free speech, viewpoint diversity. And suddenly, whatever I did, it was platforming or facilitating fascists, right-wingers, Trump, racists. So it became really scary. And we had people quit right away. People were afraid to be associated with us because I've spent much of my career studying tribalism and the us against them mindset. We evolved for intergroup conflict. We evolved for war. And as soon as the war is declared, there can be no nuance. And there's beautiful writings from, the ancient Greeks about this. George Orwell, I just came across something from George Orwell. He says, if you write about, in the 30s, if you write about the problems of British slums, suddenly you're giving fuel to the Nazis. This is before the war started. Yep. And so what are you to do? And so so Trump had that effect. He made it very difficult for anyone on the left to actually take these problems seriously, which I believe are leading to just, fatal flaws, or I'd say maybe lots of Pyrrhic victories for the left that they're now suffering from.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask Rikki a question?
Sure. Yeah.
So, Rikki, in terms of things that you saw among other students that we talked about in the book, like what rang true in addition to what you've already said for yourself or other people you knew?
Well, I think cancel culture certainly I saw explode in 2016 around the election when I was in high school and my boarding school. It was all the eruption of the safe spaces, the cancel culture, the trigger warnings.
You can't. Did you say you can't hear? Oh yeah, if you could.
Okay.
Speak up a little.
Yeah. I would say in 2016 that was when I first saw the seeds of everything, and then certainly I also the social media chapter resonated with me enormously because I watched so many of my friends struggle with mental health, and I could anecdotally pretty much correlate social media use or certainly Instagram use with how detrimental that seemed to be to them. And the amount of self-harm that I saw among my friends and peers was staggering. It was shocking. And certainly I think that you guys were at the forefront of pointing out this is what's actually behind this trend. And not a lot of people understood that yet. And I think that has just continued to ring true since.
Yeah, so to prepare for this, I remember this one thing that happened in my friend group in 2015 that I thought perfectly illustrated the problem that we're talking about. It was 2015, and I was at that point mainly a jazz musician, tapped into the subculture of New York City jazz musicians my age. And a friend of mine posted something on Facebook, posted a joke, a little silly joke about how ladies like a tenor saxophone player more than an alto saxophone player for whatever. It's just a silly little joke that showed. Yeah, no. And it was like a stick figure of an alto player with one girlfriend and a stick figure of a tenor player with like 3 girlfriends. It was just like something silly. And what followed was like a week-long Armageddon, end of the world style argument involving dozens and dozens of people posting dozens of times a day over whether or not this particular post was sexist. And then it got into tangential issues. Is there sexism in the jazz community? And it was like this, I thought to myself, 5 years before this, there was no venue on which such a bitter argument could take place. And it bled over into the real world. So now you see someone at the gig who you were on opposite sides of this Facebook post about, and you're thinking, oh God, she hates me. Do I hate her? And that to me was in a microcosm sort of what's happened on social media with political issues.
Yeah. So I'd just like to add on to, because social media it's more than an accelerant. It doesn't just make trends go faster. Yeah. It transformed the nature of human relationships because it allowed everybody to attack everybody at any point and get points for it. Mm-hmm. And so 2 things that I've learned just since I finished writing this Atlantic article like a month ago or 5 weeks ago, 2 things I've learned just since then. One, somebody sent me something about the transformative role of Tumblr. I never thought about Tumblr.
Yeah, Tumblr.
But apparently young women, it was young women on the left were all on Tumblr. And so this particular ideology of safe spaces and trigger warnings, all that really was nurtured on Tumblr.
I can actually speak to that firsthand a little bit. Just not to. So when I was in high school, I got a Tumblr when I was 15, which would have been maybe 2011, because a girl I liked was on Tumblr. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I got a Tumblr so that I could be a part of her conversation with her and her friends. And I wasn't actually interested in it. I was interested in her. But what I learned as an outsider that ended up spending a lot of time on there is that there was this whole culture of talking about mental health, intersectional politics, oppression and power, the whole nine, that was billed as if it were sort of healthy and sort of telling you how to deal with mental health, when in reality it was glorifying things like cutting and all other sorts of behaviors, where it was like you had more status on Tumblr insofar as you could more credibly claim to be someone who cut themselves and dealt with depression and all these.
Yeah.
Were you on Tumblr,
I was
Rikki?
like 12, I think, when I was on Tumblr, because I wanted to reblog pretty pink pictures. Like that was just what was happening in my mind at the time. But to your point, it's absolutely filled with this self-harm content, this depressive content. And unfortunately, in recent years, I think we've seen a lot of that move onto TikTok now, and there's self-diagnosis videos. Right. There's like this new trend of apparently girls getting Tourette's like tics just from the exposure. And so that same culture that kind of incubated on Tumblr is now moved into TikTok and is popping up in people's algorithms in an even more powerful way than it was back then.
Yeah. John, could you describe the Atlantic article?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Okay. So ever since, I had weird stuff began happening at NYU for me in January of 2014, and then Greg comes to talk to me, and we write the article, and then after it comes out, as I said, everything blew up. So I had a real feeling around then, 2014 to 2015, that something had changed in the fabric of space-time, like God had doubled the gravitational constant, or something had just changed everywhere. And I've been struggling to figure that out ever since then, ever since 2014 and that lunch with Greg. And the coddling was a piece of it. We got some things wrong. We thought college was causing it. It wasn't. It was making it worse, but it wasn't causing it. But that was our first attempt to work it out. And I've made several other attempts. And it's only after I reread the Tower of Babel story that I got the right metaphor, at least a metaphor that really clicked. And many of you, everybody knows sort of what the tower, it's about. People build a tower and God knocks it over because they're too proud. But the key line from the story that a lot of people forget is the line where God says, "Let us go down and confound their language so that they will not understand one another." And when I reread that a year or two ago, I said, oh my God, that's it. That's what's happened to us. Because I've been writing about tribalism. I've been writing about the culture war since 2001, which is a binary, left, right. But no, Babel is about the fragmentation of everything. It turns everybody against everybody. And so a lot of our problems go back to, cable TV and Fox News and various media outlets in the 90s. That begins the fragmentation. That can breed distrust, and that can breed conspiracy theories. but it doesn't turn us all against each other, and it doesn't make us hate and fight everywhere all the time. That's Babel, where we're all divided. And so I was just trying to develop that metaphor and how, in a sense, we rebuilt the tower. Technology in the 90s, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and we can all be united. And this is only the beginning of what we will do, to quote the Bible. And the peak year when we just about finished the tower, rebuilding it, this human accomplishment, is 2011, when it's now clear it begins with the Arab Spring and it ends with Occupy. And this is the final triumph of democracy. Everyone has a voice. What dictator can stand up to this? This is also the year when Google Translate is now widely available on all phones. So literally the curse of Babel, the division of humans into multiple incoherent languages, is ended in 2011. It's been downhill ever since. That was the high point. It's been downhill ever since, with a sharp fall off in 2014. So that's what the Atlantic article is about. And then I bring in a lot of social psychology to explain why this is, and merging with a lot of the technological history to explain how it seemed like things were going so well. And it really is. It's almost a very literary situation we're living in, like this story of triumph from 1989 to 2011, and then boom, off a cliff, and we're confused. We don't know what the hell happened.
Yeah, I think about it kind of like all the world's a stage, just the transformation of human dynamics when everybody is sort of playing to the cameras, so to speak. When everybody has the ability to project out what their reality is, it turns into this nonstop reality show and it's as nasty and and unfortunately not brutish and short as people can be when they actually are to forget about the interrelationship. They care about that.
Yeah. All the world is 7 billion stages. Yeah.